One day, I received a call from my father, who lives on his pension. "Thanks for the $60 a month. It helps with the cat's food." "What? I've been sending you $2,000 a month." I replied without hesitation, and my father sounded puzzled and just said, "Yes." After that, there was an awkward silence. I immediately checked out my bank account, which was set up for transfers to my father, and checked the details. What I found there was shocking. I finally understood that this was the root of all the problems. It was also the moment when my trust in Theo, built up over more than a decade, completely shattered. "Give me all my money back, right now," I said to Theo, who had just come home. But Theo just played dumb and was no help at all. However, his attitude completely woke me up. I was determined to expose his true face and get everything out of him. While I just stared at him silently, not rising to Theo's provocation, he seemed to realize that I was up to something and suddenly turned serious. "My name is Riley. I've had a dream since I was a child. I wanted to become an astronomer and unravel the mysteries of the universe. I wasn't particularly good at studying, but I excelled in science and math, so I went to a high school with a strong focus on those subjects and then to a college of science and engineering. During college, I conducted various experiments, observations, and research with my professor, aiming to work at a research institute after graduation. However, I faced a harsh reality. Unfortunately, a research job alone couldn't provide enough income, so I ended up working for a regular company and became an employee. There, I used my knowledge to get ahead of my peers, and it was during this time that I met Theo. He was 4 years older than me, and was a manager at the time. Theo, being older, took the lead, and I was drawn to him. I initiated the relationship, and we had a smooth life even after getting married. We were blessed with 2 children, a son named Hudson, who is now 18, and a daughter named Alice, who is 16. They both attend boarding schools. So, now it's just Theo and me, like before the kids were born. I had Hudson when I was 27 and quit my job at that time. Of course, I could have continued working, but I knew from my colleagues how hard it was to juggle a job and motherhood. Theo said he would help, but he didn't show much concern for me during my pregnancy and didn't even come to the birth because of some welcome party for new employees. Well, he did show up after the birth, all red-faced and in a great mood, but at that time, I was far from feeling any disgust. So, when Theo said, "It's all right. I'll support you too, Riley. Work hard at your job. Household chores and childcare should be shared, right?" I couldn't trust his words at all. That's why I quit, but it turned out to be the right decision. First of all, Theo didn't keep any of his promises. When Hudson cried, he'd say, "Hey, he's crying. He smells, maybe it's the diaper? Oh, and we're out of milk. You should go buy some," while his eyes were glued to his phone. He didn't even try to look after Hudson. I couldn't have managed if I was working under those conditions. We live in an area where it's hard to get into daycare centers. It's competitive, so getting in at age 1 was difficult. It gets easier to enroll when the kids are a bit older, so I planned to re-enter the workforce around that time. 2 years after Hudson was born, Alice arrived. Though they weren't exactly Irish twins, dealing with Hudson entering his terrible 2s and newborn Alice was tough, especially as Theo continued to dump all household chores on me. "Hey, can you help out a bit? Like going to the store for diapers or milk?" I said, and he'd always respond, "Isn't that a mother's job? I'm the breadwinner, bringing home the bacon. So let me relax at home." My friends often told me to divorce in such situations, but if it were that easy, I would have done it already. If there were no house mortgage, no car loans, and no children, a husband like him would definitely be divorced. Thinking about all this, my feelings towards Theo gradually cooled. If he thinks his only role is to earn a living, then I'll start thinking of him that way. But I didn't want to upset the kids, so I tried to keep the household environment calm, avoiding arguments as much as possible. When the kids were a bit older, an acquaintance asked if I wanted to be a teacher and researcher at a vocational school, and I enrolled. I was very satisfied, using my experience and knowledge from my corporate days and finally becoming a researcher, my lifelong dream. However, Theo didn't seem to find this amusing. When I told him I would be working as a researcher, he made a face. The reason was simple. It was jealousy because when he heard my salary, he realized I would be earning more than him. Listen, women need men in society. Yet here you are, showing off. Can't you even show a bit of consideration for your husband? I had suspected it, but Theo was incredibly proud and very much the dominant type. There were many times when he was too strict with the kids and I had to intervene. But to save enough to send our 2 kids to college, it made sense for me to work too. I tried explaining this to Theo, but he was sarcastic about my working until the end, and our relationship became more strained. Finally reaching my breaking point, when my job stabilized and my income was secure, I broached the subject with Theo. You know, I don't think there's any point in us staying married. It's not fair to the kids, and it's not doing us any good either. So, I want a divorce. By this time, I had a decent income, and the kids were old enough to manage more on their own, so we could get by without a father. I know that divorce isn't great for kids. But I started to question whether just enduring this was truly for their benefit. However, Theo refused, saying that it's definitely better for children to be raised by both parents rather than a single parent. Kids from divorced families tend to act out or have problems, right? I didn't know what he based this on. Probably just an excuse to play on my guilt and keep me tied down. But I couldn't say that everything Theo said was wrong. It's a fact that it's better for kids if both parents are together. That's probably an undeniable fact. Kids are pure creatures, for better or worse. If their friends found out about our divorce, they might ask out of curiosity. Even if I'm okay with it, Hudson and Alice might get hurt. So, even though Theo's logic was baffling, I couldn't argue back and ultimately didn't go through with the divorce. That's when I decided to shift my mindset. Theo might not be a great husband or father. However, Theo never cheated and always provided for our living expenses. He doesn't have expensive hobbies, and spends at most about $40 a month on mobile games. He doesn't gamble and is willing to pay for the kids' extracurricular activities. In that regard, I had no complaints. But his actions and words were still too much at times. He imposed a strict set of values on Hudson, often saying things like this. Listen, Hudson. A man's worth is in his earnings. Never become a part-timer. That's just being lazy. Earn more than women, be like me. You're the future of our family, so have that awareness. Theo always said we were a family with a legacy, but honestly, we don't have any remarkable achievements or a history of being wealthy landowners or anything like that. My mother-in-law once mentioned that our ancestors were just farmers, like many others. Fortunately, my in-laws never imposed their views or made unreasonable demands on Hudson, which was a small mercy in all of this. But what he taught Alice, contrary to Hudson, was always outrageous. Alice, listen carefully. A woman's only way to survive in this society is to get married. So, you should work right after high school, contribute money to the house, and support your brother. I've never seen someone distinguish between genders like this in this day and age. It's indescribable to think that this person is my husband. It was like a throwback to another era. Every time Theo indoctrinated the kids with his outdated views, I'd contradict him, saying his ideas were old-fashioned. But stubborn as he was, Theo never changed his ways. This might have been why Hudson started acting out and clashing with Theo when he hit middle school, and why Alice never wanted to go out if Theo was going to be there. Theo, of course, didn't seem to care. As the kids grew up and left for boarding school, Theo's critical attention shifted back to me. He'd say things like I was looking down on him for being a researcher, a woman no less, or that I was acting high and mighty even though his own college was far more prestigious. Sometimes, he'd even talk about my income to others, painting himself as a failure of a husband to garner sympathy. I never once belittled Theo about his education or job, but he'd twist things around, making it seem like I was the one putting him down. Ignoring him only led to more insults about how awful a wife I was for not listening to my husband. The silver lining was that the kids weren't around to witness this. I figured I'd just endure a few more years until the kids were fully independent and then pursue a divorce. Then one day, I got a call from my father. My mother had passed away, and my 66-year-old father was living a modest life on his pension and savings in a distant town. He's always been frugal, never indulging in luxuries. About a year ago, he mentioned he started keeping a few cats, but that was about it. Other than that, there were no significant changes in his lifestyle. Typically, he'd only call about the kids or on my birthday. So it was surprising to get a call on an ordinary day. But then he said something that made my ears ring. Thanks for the $60 a month. It helps with the cat's food. I couldn't help but respond. What? I've been sending you $2,000 a month. Then, my father sounded puzzled and just said, yes? After that, there was an awkward silence. What on earth was he talking about? I tried to organize my thoughts and spoke to my father again. Dad, I've been transferring $2,000 to your account every month. What do you mean by $60? After asking me to hold on, my father sent a photo of his bank statement to me. I was shocked and at a loss for words when I saw it. Indeed, as my father said, the monthly allowance I sent was just a mere $60. I couldn't understand what was happening, but it was clear that something nefarious was going on behind the scenes. Dad, I'll do what I can to investigate this from here. I'll get back to you as soon as possible, so please wait a little longer. I said quickly and hung up the phone. I immediately pulled out my bank book, which I had set up for automatic transfers to my father, and checked the details. The contents were shocking. Finally, I understood that this was the root of all the problems. It was also the moment my years-long belief in Theo completely collapsed. As soon as Theo came home, I confronted him, "Give me all my money back, right now." But Theo just played dumb, making no sense at all. Worse, he accused me of spouting nonsense and even suggested that I should go to a hospital. I couldn't believe he looked down on me to this extent. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been dumped over my head. But at the same time, it was a wake-up call. I was determined to expose his true colors and get to the bottom of everything. As I stared at him without responding to his provocation, he suddenly turned serious, as if realizing I was up to something. I slammed a copy of the bank statement I had been examining earlier onto the table in front of Theo. His frown deepened as he looked at it. "Regardless," I said. "This is the account I set up to automatically transfer $2,000 from my paycheck each month. I don't usually use it. I don't carry the bank around, so I don't update it regularly. But why is it checked every month?" Theo didn't respond and just glared at me in silence. After a tense few seconds, he finally started making excuses. "Well, that is strange. You suspect me, but you don't have any proof that I did it, right? The principle of innocence until proven guilty applies here. Don't you know that?" His infuriating manner of speaking was annoying, especially because he had a point. Theo was smarter than me, and probably just as cunning in coming up with schemes like this. If he were the kind to slip up under questioning, I would have divorced him and raised the kids on my own a long time ago. I was repeatedly dumbfounded and frustrated by his shrewdness. And indeed, as Theo said, there was no direct evidence of him tampering with anything. But in this house, it's just me and Theo. Even without evidence, it was clear that he was responsible. I pointed out the inconsistency in the bank book and said, "Normally, if the transfer date falls on a weekend or holiday, I set it up to transfer the money in advance. The settings are to automatically transfer $2,000 to my dad's account on the 1st of every month. Since my payday is the 25th, I immediately transfer $2,000 to this account as soon as my salary is deposited." I paused and looked at Theo, who seemed a bit tense. It was unclear what he was thinking, but he might have been concocting some excuse in case I confronted him further. I looked back at the bank book and continued. "So, if the 1st is a weekend or holiday, the transfer happens on the last day of the previous month. Therefore, there shouldn't be any movement of money between the 25th and 29th. Yet, strangely, the day after I put in $2,000, $60 is sent to my dad, and the rest is withdrawn. Don't you think it's odd that there's activity other than the automatic transfer?" In response to my question, Theo hesitated for just a moment before quickly countering with a laugh. "Even if that's true, so what? Where's the proof that I took your bank book and withdrew the money? And even if I did take almost $2,000, what would I use it for?" Theo was grinning infuriatingly. I just looked at him silently, and thinking he had won, he suddenly became talkative. "I earn a decent amount, and you, receiving the household expenses, should know I'm not short on cash. Plus, I can't tamper with those automatic settings, right? You're a researcher, you should use your brain more." After rattling off his words as Theo, seemingly pleased with himself, headed off to the bathroom. If he thought he had won with that, his mind was really a fantasy land. The thought of his triumphant face crumbling later almost made me laugh. He thought he had bested me and was even singing some nonsensical song in the bath. When Theo came out of the bathroom, all cheerful, I greeted him with an overly bright smile. He looked startled and backed away, saying, "What's up?" You got more to say? I presented a printout of my message history and asked shortly, "What's this?" Theo froze on the spot. When my dad sent me the photo of the bank account, I was shocked, but even more so when I found a conversation with my dad that I didn't recall having. I rarely use text messages. Usually, it's just for receiving login confirmation codes. For most communications, including with work colleagues, friends, and children, I use free messaging apps or social media messages. That's why I didn't notice this exchange, and Theo probably used the text message deliberately, knowing I wouldn't check it. It was about 10 months old and definitely not from me. The messages appeared to be from me, but I didn't write them or communicate with my father. Needless to say, it was Theo. "Hey, this message here, you identified yourself, right? It's Theo, Riley's husband. How are you, Dad? Why did you contact my dad through my text? If you wanted to talk to him personally, you could have just asked me directly instead of sneaking around like this." I questioned him with a smile. Theo's triumphant expression disappeared, replaced by a look of panic. "What? You don't even use text messages, how did you find out?" He was clearly flustered. His reaction indicated that he had definitely tampered with my phone and contacted my father. "Let's see, what does it say here? Actually, Riley is hospitalized and we need money, so we can't send you the usual amount. But I remember Riley telling me you have cats, so we at least want to continue sending some money for the cat food. Therefore, we're reducing the amount but we'll keep sending it. Please understand." I read the message aloud monotonously. Theo then started apologizing profusely. "There's a deep reason behind this. I didn't mean any harm to you or your father. Please believe that, I beg you." He apologized, then began to explain the situation. He knew that I had been sending $2,000 to my dad every month and had even agreed to it. But suddenly, Theo needed money and thought of tapping into that $2,000. He didn't have my father's contact details to communicate directly, and there was no way he could ask my dad to redirect the $2,000 to him. So, he came up with a plan to pretend I was sick, garnering my father's sympathy and understanding. Theo knew how to unlock my phone, and while I was in the bathroom, he sent that message. My dad, being the kind person he is, must have believed it. As to why I didn't receive any concerned messages from my dad, Theo had covered that up too. He told my dad that I was struggling with my illness and it was tough, so to leave me alone for a while. That's why, for these 10 months, my dad didn't contact me. His call today was probably because enough time had passed and, out of concern, he chose a topic unrelated to my supposed illness, hence mentioning the cat food. "So, you can't talk your way out of this one, can you? That's almost $20,000 you've taken over the past 10 months, right? Now, give it back, right now." I demanded, but Theo burst into tears, saying it was impossible. He had already spent it, and there was nothing left. He confessed that he had used it to pay off debts he had incurred without my knowledge. After calming down, I asked Theo if I could believe him, and he nodded repeatedly. Looking at him, I warned, "If you betray me again, I'll seriously come after you for nearly $20,000. Be prepared." Theo nodded, shaking in fear. It seemed like the matter was settled, and Theo appeared completely relieved. To appease me, he became unusually kind recently, coming straight home without making any detours, and even buying cakes from my favorite bakery. Despite his oblivious behavior, I was secretly making moves. When the time was right, Theo would be shocked again. One day, as he came home in a good mood, I pointed to the living room table right after greeting him. He froze in surprise when he saw it. Because it was a divorce paper, with my section already filled out, lying there. "What's this? I thought we had settled that previous matter. I said I'd start paying you back little by little, and you forgave me, didn't you?" he said with a forced smile. Just like Theo used to, I snorted and declared. "You thought that was the end of it?" Seeing Theo lost for words, I pulled out some documents from the drawer. His face turned pale, and he let out a small cry of shock. "I see, so you cheated and got someone pregnant. Instead of marrying her, you agreed to pay child support, right? You're unbelievable." Theo never showed any signs of being so financially strapped that he had to resort to borrowing money. I was paying for our kids' education in full, and we decided to use Theo's income for living expenses and our retirement savings. Now, I earn a decent amount myself, and Theo, being a manager at his company, should be earning a substantial salary too. So, it was always a mystery to me why he would need to take on debt. My intuition as a woman told me he might be spending it on an affair or something like a nightclub. I'm the type who can't rest until I take action, so I hired a detective online to look into this matter. The detective found that Theo was still visiting a certain woman and handing her money, capturing the moment in photographs. Upon inquiring around the woman's neighborhood, it turned out she was living as a single mother. So, it seems you've been paying her child support every month as hush money to keep her from spilling about your affair. But she demanded $4,000 a month, including living expenses. Thinking that amount was too much, you targeted the $2,000 I sent to my dad and stole it, right? As I calmly disclosed this, Theo seemed to lose all his strength and collapse to the ground, muttering excuses. No, it's not like that. I didn't mean for it to end this way. Why is this happening to me? After sighing at Theo's response, I simply told him I wanted to divorce and asked him to sign the divorce papers. Clinging to my legs, Theo begged, "Please, don't divorce me. At my age, I can't imagine what others will think if I get divorced. And the kids might not even want to see me anymore. I can't stand that. It's too hard. Please." Of course, I refused with a smile and said, "If you don't sign, I'm fine taking this to court." Realizing he had no chance of winning, he finally signed the papers with trembling hands. But it wasn't over yet. I felt that just demanding compensation wasn't enough. After destroying our marriage, she was comfortably receiving subsidies and allowances. Thinking that was so infuriating. There was still one suspicious point about the automatic transfer. I could understand Theo using my bank account and PIN to withdraw money. We shared PINs, and it was possible to withdraw money using the account alone. I could also understand his actions based on where the money went. But the issue with the automatic transfer remained a mystery. Once, I forgot to deposit money on the transfer day. And the bank contacted me, which was a great help, but this time there had been no contact for these 10 months. Considering their previous prompt response, the complete lack of communication this time was strange, so I checked with the bank about the automatic transfer. To my surprise, it had already been cancelled. This procedure requires the account holder's approval, so even if Theo attempted it, the bank should have contacted me. The only explanation was that Theo had an accomplice at the bank. It means that he has a partner on the bank side. If you think about it like that, all your questions will make sense. And, of course, that accomplice was Theo's affair partner. The partner was Emma, a 29-year-old bank employee. Emma pretended to be assisting Theo with a general transaction but actually processed the cancellation of my automatic transfer. This was a serious crime. By exploiting her position as a bank employee for personal gain, she had committed a crime. Furthermore, as I investigated Emma, I stumbled upon an unexpected fact, leading to a small victory celebration on my part. Later, I called both Theo and Emma to confront them with the demand for compensation. All the evidence is in place, and your presence here today means you acknowledge the affair, right? When I said this, Theo nodded faintly with a pale face, while Emma, seemingly unconcerned, was admiring her nails, lost in her own world. She must think Theo would pay her share since she assumed this meeting was pointless. She couldn't bring her child, so she left them with her parents under some pretext. Since Theo was already damaged by the divorce crisis and the compensation claim, I decided to leave him be for the moment and turned my attention to Emma. By the way, you're applying for child support allowance, right? And you're also receiving benefits from the bank for single parents. But you're getting $4,000 a month from Theo, right? That's a crime. And of course, your unauthorized cancellation of my automatic transfer is a serious offense too. Then, Emma's face suddenly contorted with anxiety, and she started to fidget nervously, making it all too obvious, which made me secretly chuckle to myself. She was making excuses, but the detective had confirmed everything. If you're saying this information is incorrect, let's call your boss right now to confirm. Maybe it's also a good idea to check the conditions for receiving child support benefits and see if you qualify. I said. Hearing this, Emma quickly changed her attitude and apologized to me. I was just tempted. I never planned to marry him or anything like that, so I backed off. Please, don't push me and my child any further. I almost exploded in anger at Emma's behavior, acting as if she were the victim. The real victim in this situation is undoubtedly me, and perhaps Emma's child who got dragged into this. Definitely not these cheaters. Theo then started to defend Emma. Enough, leave her alone. Emma didn't mean any harm. Looking at Theo, I couldn't help but laugh. He didn't understand why he was being laughed at, but I wondered what his face would look like when he learned the final truth. Still smiling, I said, "So, you think it's alright that she was making you pay child support and living expenses for a child that's not even yours?" At this, Emma stood up, eyes wide, interrupting me. "Stop, please! Don't say any more!" But Theo, displaying his usual quick thinking, said, "Wait, does that mean the child isn't mine?" Emma's face contorted, and Theo looked utterly confused. The detective had found that Emma was receiving child support from another man as well, claiming the child was Theo's, and also taking $1,000 a month from the real father. Although the investigation cost me quite a bit, the outcome was worth more. Theo, who thought he had everything under control, and Emma, who was about to join him in this hellish reality. I felt relieved, but Theo and Emma's aura was dark and heavy. But they brought it upon themselves. If they can't distinguish between right and wrong, someone needs to enlighten them. They finally realized the gravity of their actions after paying the price. After getting their signatures on all the necessary documents, including the compensation claim, I finally filed for divorce from Theo, turning him into a stranger. I only told my children, Hudson and Alice, living far away, that we had divorced. They, being perceptive, said, "We're on your side, Mom." I told them they didn't have to come home for the holidays, but once they heard about the divorce, they immediately planned to visit during their next long break. They didn't ask what happened, but they were relieved to hear I got custody. The children's education funds were still my responsibility, and I had already made some investments, not fully trusting Theo. I thought it would help with our retirement. As for Theo and Emma, they faced unimaginable consequences. Theo, now divorced at his age, became the subject of wild rumors at his company. Already known for belittling his wife and speaking ill of female employees, he was soon bombarded with nasty comments about his infidelity and being dumped. He eventually requested a department transfer and was exiled to a remote location. But he accepted it without complaint. He realized he had no place left at the main office. Also, the financial burden of the nearly $20,000 repayment, compensation, and the children's education fees, which he was responsible for, left his household finances in dire straits. Emma, exposed at the bank, resigned voluntarily. She had to return all the benefits she had defrauded from the bank to avoid prosecution, leaving her without enough money and forced to return to her parents' home. After spilling everything to her parents, she got a severe scolding. Currently, she's working as a contract employee at her father's company, with her parents managing all her finances, leaving her with no freedom. Her parents, being very honest people, paid all the compensation I demanded from Emma. They initially covered it but made it clear they would charge her the full amount. Years have passed since the divorce. Hudson is thriving in a top company after finishing grad school, and Alice is excelling in medical school, with her exams coming up next year. Without Theo, the children have continued on their paths, and they even assured me they would support me in my old age. No allies could be stronger than this. I'm so grateful that my children grew up straight and true, not like Theo, and they are the treasures of my life.